Blog Talk Radio.
We are the UR Tennis Network. Our mission is to be the voice of tennis. We enlist a team of passionate enthusiasts to promote our sport. We strive to bring interesting perspectives on the many spins of tennis. Our goal is to provide the learners of our sport with current news and information from many angles. We seek active participation from communities interested in tennis, but tennis is not interested in them. We are expanding our outreach. Tennis is a true lifetime sport that needs to be talked about, and the UR Tennis Network pledges to pursue this idea relentlessly.
Welcome to the Parenting Aces radio show on Blog Talk Radio's UR Tennis Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and we have another great show for you today, and I'm really excited to jump right in. I want to apologize in advance for any background noise you might be hearing during today's show. I am actually pre-recording the show. I'm still on vacay at the beach and in a house with 13 other people, so it's a bit noisy here, but we're having a great time, and I'm really looking forward to my conversation with today's guest, Jorge Capestany, and I'm going to go ahead and bring Jorge on right now, and we'll jump right in. Jorge, thanks so much for being with us. Hey, thanks so much.
No problem.
I wanted to start out by asking you to give our listeners a little bit of history on your involvement with tennis.
Sure. So I've been in the tennis industry now for a little over 30 years. I was originally actually born in Havana, Cuba in 1962. But if you know anything about Cuban history at that time, that was pretty volatile times, and my parents wanted to get out because they didn't think the new leader, Fidel Castro, was going to be any good. So our family came in 62, so even though I was born in Cuba, I was basically, raised here in America. I do speak Spanish because that was the first language I learned at home. But I was kind of a latecomer to tennis as a junior player. I didn't really think of tennis in Hudsonville, Michigan, where I lived. But my two best friends that came to the Hudsonville School District when they were in junior high, and I became friends with them, they were tennis players. In fact, their dad was the tennis coach. So my freshman year in high school, I decided that instead of playing baseball in the spring, I would play tennis. And that was basically because I wanted to hang out with my friends. And I was a good enough athlete to, get on the last spot on the team. And I made varsity. I wasn't very good, but I made varsity, and that was cool. So I kind of stuck with it. I still played the other sports most of the time. I played football and I played basketball. And it wasn't until my senior year, actually, in high school that I thought, I'm getting good enough at tennis, I might have a chance at least to play college tennis, and I knew I wasn't going to play those other sports in college. So I became a tennis, USTA player fairly late in the game. My first USTA tournament ever was when I was 16 and under. And a true but kind of a sad story is that I played in this tournament. I went with the group of players from our club. Our coach did a good job of kind of bringing us around as a little team. And I wasn't, one of the newer players, but I was still pretty good. And I lost in this tournament to a person, a seed, 6-0, 6-0, my first ever USTA match. I think I was 16. It was in the 16 and unders. And this is how little I knew about it. I was just kind of bummed and embarrassed. And my coach came up afterwards and said, hey, listen, don't worry, man, because you get to play in the back draw now. There's a whole other consolation tournament, which I didn't even know anything about. So I thought, really? So I'm not done? I get to play? Sure. He says, as a matter of fact, it's going to be easier because these guys have all lost. You're going to get some good experience here. And that was great, except that I lost 6-0, 6-0 the next round, too. And basically, he already told me that was a scrub division, so I was like, oh, man, I'm no good. But I toughed it out, and I eventually started getting my wins. And, so that was my early years, and then I became a tennis professional fairly early. I didn't really have plans to do that, but my former college partner, John Corpy, right as I was graduating college, he was 2 years older, he said, hey, we need a head pro at the club, and I thought, well, I'll do that. I won't do it for a career, but it'd be a nice thing to do for a couple of years, and here I am 30-some years later, and I'm still doing it. So I love it, but that's my quick tennis background.
I love it. And it's just a true testament to how this sport really gets in your blood and doesn't let you leave so easily.
Yeah, for sure.
So now you're a coach in Michigan. You are married to a tennis coach. You have a daughter who plays tennis. And as a recent development, I'm assuming relatively recent, you've become very active in providing online education to players, to coaches, pretty much whoever wants to access it. And that's how I came across you. You recently did a series of videos on the mental side of the game that I've shared on our Facebook page, and I've watched and learned from, and I think are just fantastic. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe you can talk a little bit about what inspired you to start creating these videos and to make them available to other coaches and players.
Sure. Well, a little bit about once I did start teaching, I was frankly kind of lucky. I had a knack for teaching, I think, and in my neighborhood, my first club, which is in Granville, Michigan, I happened to have some fairly motivated families that could afford it and had really athletic kids. And early on, I was able to develop some really, really good players. So it wasn't, by the time I was 25 or 6, I already had a bunch of really highly nationally ranked players. And if you know anything about teaching tennis, once you have that in a certain city, you're kind of labeled the guy that's good with high performance. So then they all start coming towards you. And in the next 3 years, I had 3 different kids win USTA gold balls. They won some national championships. And then it was really crazy because now people are coming from miles and miles, literally hours and hours away to be in our program. So that was my early teaching history. And, I was a high-performance guy for sure. I've now taught more than 55,000 hours on the court over my 30 years. I've been on top of that, probably another 15,000 hours of watching my kids at tournaments, and I was the guy that would go to the Nationals and the Midwest Close and all, just stayed there for a whole week watching kids compete. But my first speaking gig and kind of video gig was actually not for players as much as it was for coaches. I'm fortunate enough to travel the whole world and get to speak at some really cool coaches conferences because I have this website I developed for coaches, which is called tennisdrills.tv. It's got over 1,000 drills on it, and subscribers from like 65 different countries all over the world. It's a pretty big deal, and because people know me through that, and a lot of tennis conventions are always looking for someone who can present on the topic of drills, I get to go. I was this last year alone. I was in Mexico with the ITF World Conference, and I got invited to the Australian Open, which is really cool. I got to speak right in Hisense Arena. I've been to Norway. I've been to the U.S. Open several times. I'll do that again this coming August. So that was my first adventure in making videos that was for tennis coaches. But the tennis coaches website has some things for players, but not so much. So I always had this idea that I wanted to help players beyond what just I could do in my club. I'm pretty decent in front of the camera, and I have a lot of equipment and people that help me with that. So I thought I would do a tennis players website, and that's really recent. That's only been around for like maybe a couple of months. But that site is just JorgeCapestany.com, my name. But that one is where you're referring to the mental toughness video. So as a coach of players, I know I've been on the front lines of just so many kids struggling with their mental toughness and, their self-worth and this whole mess where people can get into where, I didn't play well, so I stink as a person. And I've always kind of hated that. I know I suffered a little bit from that when I competed. It was real easy for me to be in a good mood or a bad mood based on how well I struck this little yellow ball. So that was always important to me to kind of help kids in that area. So the idea of the free course on the website was I wanted to do an area that was, of most interest to people. So I do have about 7,000 emails that I can reach out to and ask people questions. So I just did a survey of what do you want the most help with. And this was to coaches and also to players, and I asked coaches to ask their players. And the number one topic that came back, and it's probably not a total surprise, was mental toughness. Really love to see some education and video on mental toughness. So I've been teaching mental toughness for quite a while. I had already written a book about mental toughness, and that's actually now been converted to an ebook, and they get it for free. So I wanted there to be this video course, basically, on my website, so that when you go on there, you can see all kinds of cool stuff. There's slow motion pictures or slow motion videos of Rafa and all these the best players, and there's a lot of videos of watching them practice a little bit at their tournaments all over the world, and then there's some instructional videos. But the thing I'm most excited about is the mental toughness video course. Once someone asks for it, it's free, and it gets delivered to them over about 6 or 7 days. It comes right to their inbox, the first video, then a couple of days later, the next, and the next. And that's been great, because now I'm getting feedback from people all over the world about, hey, this is really helpful, and I like what you said about this. And they're pretty beefy videos. I'm actually probably going to edit them down a little bit, because right now they're 40 minutes long as the first one, and then maybe 30 or 25 for the rest. So, but that's just an area a whole area that I'm very interested in, because as a player and more so as a coach, it saddens me to see how many kids in particular, but really adults too, just kind of, they go around thinking bad of themselves. They just think they're less than. There's this thing about the American player in particular, because I get to go all over the world, and I think it's a little different, but because the American junior in particular doesn't play as many sets as his counterparts elsewhere, when they do compete, they sometimes struggle. And then if they struggle, they start to wonder, well, why am I good in practice and I'm not good here on the court? And if that happens over and over and over, it's not a surprise that they start thinking, well, I'm flawed. There's something wrong with me. I don't compete well. And they kind of walk around with a bad attitude about themselves. So that's my passion. I want to help people navigate that minefield of tennis and not have it be something that makes them think less of themselves.
You tell a story in one of the video segments in the Mental Toughness series that just so struck a nerve for me. And I'm going to let you tell it, but it's the one where you were a junior and you were at practice and your coach was walking around calling you names. Can you
it was really weird.
Great story.
So I had a coach. This is now this happened to me when I was about 18. So I'm quite a decent player by that time. But I was having a bad day, and I was playing on clay, which wasn't my favorite surface because I like to come in all the time. And I'm playing a guy who's probably as good, if not a little better than me. And on this particular day, we wrapped up the last hour of a 3-hour practice was basically matches. We were playing sets against each other. There was probably about 8 of us out there on 4 courts. And my coach was a very quiet guy. He wasn't a real rah-rah guy. He wasn't a yeller. He was just a real quiet guy and kind of spoke softly. And I was having one of my days. I was having a bad day. So my inner voice was negative. I was yelling at myself and, come on, you stink, and this, that, and the other. It wasn't too much longer that my inner voice now has become my outer voice, and I'm yelling out loud and move your feet, you cow, and all this stuff. So I was getting mad at myself, and now everybody else was seeing it. And my coach was walking around. He would just do laps, basically. He'd walk around all 4 courts watching us. He'd make a few comments here and there. And near the end, he walked past me and said something like, come on, move, you cow. And then he just kept walking. And I looked at him like, what? What did he just say? I couldn't believe what I heard. And I go, no, that can't be. I mean, what's going on here? He just told me. So it just freaked me out. But he moved on, and I kind of kept playing. And, about maybe 5 minutes later, he's coming around my corner again. And this time as he walks by, he said something like, come on, your forehand, man. What a joke. You suck. And then he keeps walking. Well, this time I for sure, and now I know I heard it. I'm like, what? And it's just freaking me out. I'm thinking, what is going on? Am I on camera here? Is this some kind of show? Are they tricking me? And that went on about 3 or 4 times. And I just was really, confused. Like, what's the deal here with Coach saying these things? Well, it wasn't a few minutes later. We're wrapping up practice, and he's making some announcements, and then he looks at me, but now I'm in front of my other 7 buddies, and he says, Jorge, how did you like those things I was saying to you? And, of course, I'm 18, so I said something like, I don't know, I made some grunting noise, I don't know. And he goes, well, I just want you to know that all I was doing is writing down what you were saying to yourself and repeating it. And I told him, and I was positive of it. I go, well, I didn't say any of those things, because I honestly, didn't think I did. And then all my buddies said, wait, you did say all that stuff. I heard you were saying it. So that was an example to me of just how negative my self-talk had become, and I wasn't even aware of it. So as a coach, that's interesting to me because I listen to kids, and sometimes their private voice gets to be kind of negative, and then their private voice becomes their public voice. And now I know that I have to help them with that because in my example, I swear I would have swore the Bible. There's no way I said any of those things, and my buddies all ratted me out that indeed I had, and probably I did. I'm sure that I did. But that was how unaware I was of my internal self-talk. So that was one of my own failures there, but that was kind of a wake-up moment for me to have that happen. And because one of my coaching tips now, and I do think one of my heroes is Jim Lair. He's a mental toughness coach. He's the author of many books like The Only Way to Win. That's his most recent book. It's really good about the only purpose of tennis is to build character, and if you're just doing it to win, you're not going to be satisfied, and blah, blah, blah. So it's really good. But he's very much, about the inner voice. And I just heard him speak in Cancun at this ITF coaches workshop I was at. And he said the number one job that a tennis coach can help their kids with is to develop a proper private voice. Of all the things you can think about, that's the one thing he thinks is the most important job that we have as tennis coaches. So I took that serious. I try to really do that with my kids. And, these kids don't wake up in the morning thinking, I can't wait to go to tennis and get mad at myself and start ragging all over myself. That's not what they want when they wake up. But they get there pretty quickly sometimes. So it's not like they want to do it, but they need some help and they need some guidance of, A, be aware of it, B, here's some tricks to kind of control it. But that's a huge part.
Well, you have a daughter who plays at a pretty high level. So you not only have you been a player and a coach, but now you've also gone through the whole tennis parent piece of things. And I'm sure you have some unique perspectives to share on that as well. Did you coach your daughter as she was coming up too?
Yeah, see, my daughter was a late comer as well. And the story about that is, so I've been a teaching professional for 30 years. So has my wife. My wife is actually the player of the family. She's been, ranked as high as top 10 in the women's 35s USTA, so she's really good. And we're in our mid-50s now, but she can play and always has played. So Marty's my wife, we always taught at the same club. And when we had Carly, that's our daughter, we were hoping that she'd like to be doing tennis, but we made up our minds we're not going to force tennis on our daughter. We thought it might be weird for her and, maybe a little extra pressure because Mom and Dad are pretty well known. So as Marty and I would hit sometimes, we'd ask her, she's a little 5-year-old, take her through the park, we'd hit. And we'd say, hey, Carly, you want to hit? And she would, no, I'm going to go to the slide. So we'd let her go to the slide. So really she never showed any interest. And then I was at a conference when she was about 11 years old. I went to the USPTA World Conference, and I'm listening to Dr. Jim Lair speak again. And he was talking about his own story where he had a couple of sons that he was hoping would play, and he would come home and he had a ball machine in his backyard, and he'd try to get them to play, and they never would really go out and play. And then, he was kind of bumming, but he also didn't want to force it down their throat. And then a few years later, the two boys went out for tennis on their high school team and weren't playing as good as they thought they would. And then they kind of came to Jim and said, well, Dad, how come, you're working with Pete Sampras and all these famous players, and we stink at tennis. And he's like, what? What do you mean? You had all the chances in the world. So he was telling a story about how his other son, Jeff, that came, several years later, Jim took a new approach with him, and he said, you know what? You're gonna play tennis. So he told Jeff, we're the Lairs. The Lairs play tennis. That's what we do. So you need to learn the sport of tennis. However, I'm not going to require you to play tournaments. I'm not going to require you to even be in the high school team. You're just going to play because I want you to learn the sport. And when we go on vacation, I want to do stuff with you. So that kid said, sure, all right, I'll do it. And then that kid ended up becoming a professional. I think he was top 200 in the world or something. So when I came home, I asked Marty, I said, hey, what do you think of this approach with Carly? And we kind of liked it. And so we went to Carly at 11 or so, and I said, look, we want you to play tennis, but our promise to you is you don't have to be great. You don't have to play in high school. You don't have to play tournaments. But, we would vacation in Mexico all the time, and Marty and I would hit a tennis ball, and she would just sit there. By going with you stuff like that, I want you to be able to play with us. It's a good sport. You can play for life. She was open to it, and said, okay, I'll do it. The cool thing to me is Carly knew even before she got into tennis that there was something weird about Coach Dad, because I'd always have all these really good players over to the house. I had pictures of her, holding on to the ponytail of one of my national champions. We had a pool in our old house, and she was like a little kid, like 6 or 7. She would go ponytail around the ponytail, and so she grew up with a bunch of really elite tennis players in her life, so she knew about them. So she I guess I had some respect from her in that regard. She knew I was a good coach. So I coached her, and I think I did a pretty good job, because coaching your kid is, super tricky. But I had a front row seat to a lot of how it was done wrong. So I think I learned from that, and we had some pretty good times. I think it's a good parent-coach relationship, and I think I call it a success. One of the things I adopted a question, really our motto, our family motto, and I teach this to families all the time when I consult with them, is you don't want to hold your kid responsible for things that are not within their control. So I told Carly, my daughter, I go, here's what's important to me and to your mom. We want you to try like crazy. We want you to fight and really have great hustle. That's within your control. So that's going to be something we measure you on. And the second thing is we want you to behave well and be a good sport. So those are 2 things that I'm going to ask you after every match, Carly. And you better be able to say, yes, I did good on those. So literally, she was, in high school, she played on a team that was quite good. She was actually number 2 singles behind this Division I player. So she got to win. I mean, she won like 110 high school matches. So she got used to winning. But every match, I would come up to her and say, so, did you behave well? Yep. Did you fight like a dog? Yep. And frankly, she could always answer yes, because she was a pretty well-behaved kid. So if she answered yes to both of those, the next question out of my mouth is, where are we eating? Because we would go out to eat. That's another thing I like to do. So that's a good tip, because a lot of times parents come to me and say, well, I just had one last week. My kid, they want to take private lessons and they want to do the academy, and I'm spending money like crazy, and they don't play any tournaments. So my advice to that parent was, that should be part of the deal. Tennis, just for the sake of it, is kind of an expensive thing. So part of their development should be to play tournaments. So I advise this family to set up a deal and say, look, and this kid's name was Ryan, here's the deal. Mom and Dad are going to pay for a private lesson every week. You're going to do drills 3 times a week. In return, you're going to hustle, you're going to behave well, and you're going to play X number of tournaments. If you don't want that deal, that's fine. You don't have to do it. But we're not going to see that. I think I'm okay with, because it's up to that's within the kid's control. What I'm not okay with is that parent were to go to that kid and say, now I want you to be number 1 singles. If we're going to pay all this money, you should be number 1 singles this fall. Now you're going into areas that they can't control. Or I want you to be, your buddy Fred or something. So it's a real simple barometer. If it's within their control, you can hold them accountable. If it's not, you really shouldn't. And that's been a huge success for my family personally, and a lot of the families that I have been involved with.
Well, let's talk about this whole accountability deal, because that's one of the things that I feel like is really challenging as a tennis parent. Understanding what things I should hold my child accountable for, what things the coach should be holding my child accountable for, and which things are the kid's responsibility. So,
sure.
Since you brought up that issue, I'm gonna have you delve a little deeper there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I call that relationship the triangle, and different coaches have different philosophies about that triangle. The triangle being the player, the coach, and the parent. And I think it has to be connected, and it has to be synergistic, and it has to be cooperative. Now, I know there's a lot of high-performance coaches in particular that have the view, keep the parent out of here. They're nothing but a pain. Maybe some parents are a pain, but they don't want to have anything to do with the parent. I know what I'm doing. The kid's working hard. Just get out of here. And that's not a good deal. One of the videos I have, I know you promoted it, is on YouTube called How to Watch Your Kids Play Tennis. And it talks a little bit about this, because one of the toughest jobs ever is being a tennis parent, because basically you get to pay a lot of bills, drag your kid all over, you get to be present when he's in a bad mood after he loses, and you get all the crappy parts of it. And the coach might say something to him after a match like, hey, you really got to work a point longer. But if the parent says something like that, no, Mom, shut up, you don't know. So it's like a lose almost to be a tennis parent. So I think when it comes to that relationship, the better coaches are involved. And studies show that the best players had a proper amount of parental involvement. They weren't totally, uninvolved, but they weren't overly involved. So I was in Norway last March, and one of the pleasures I had there was getting to meet Kim Kleisters. I had dinner with her a couple of times, and I've always admired Kim anyway. She's a great sportsman, a great player. And her personal coach, Carl Maas, who took her from a little girl to number one in the world, he also came out of retirement when she came out of retirement and got her back to number one again. And Carl is a friend of mine. I know him from a couple of different conventions, and he was there, and they were talking on the court, and Kim gave this really good talk to these coaches about just her tennis life in general. And it was very interesting. Her parents are both world-class athletes. The dad was a soccer player, and the mom was a gymnast. And but she said they did the perfect amount of tennis parenting. They would bring her, and then they would just hang out. They never tried to instruct her. They never got mad at her about her results, and she had tough losses or a stretch where she wasn't doing well. They would just say, hey, hang in there. And, they, in her opinion, that was a real blessing that her parents were properly aligned with what they should have been doing. So, topic number one, or tip number one, is I think you need to have a coach who is involving the parent. It's not appropriate to just have the parent pay the bill, get out of here, that's all I want you to do. That's I think, going too far, asking too much of the parent. At the same time, I know I'm an exception, but I think it's real dangerous to coach your own child. You have to have a lot of experience, and I had a lot of experience seeing it done wrong. So I had a lot of things that I knew I was going to need to avoid doing with my daughter. But that can be treacherous. I think it's a little tough because sometimes you watch tennis on TV and you see all these parents sitting in the stands, and they're often called that's their coach, like the Williams coached by her dad or coached by her mom. It's really misleading in my opinion because, the Williams sisters moved out to Rick Macy's Academy. Rick is the one that taught them a lot of tennis. And almost every parent that's sitting in there might be an advisor, but they're not responsible for developing that player's game hardly ever. Bollettieri developed Sharapova. So I think it gives a wrong message because if you're just Joe American person watching tennis and you see all these parents, you can draw the conclusion, wow, all these parents made these famous tennis players. I think that's what I should do. But if you look a little closer, you realize that they had a lot of help from certified pros and really good coaches that knew what they were doing. And the parent might take over that role once the person's, an established pro and traveling the world. But I think that's the one thing. So my quick advice to families seems to always come back to that concept of what's controllable and what's not. One of the things that parents struggle with the most is how much their kids actually play instead of drilling. So I wrote an article, it's actually on my website, the tennis players one, JorgeCapestany.com, and it's called Serial Drillers. And in our country, more than any other country, kids want to drill. They want to take lessons. They want to buy equipment. They'll take more lessons. I want a private. I want another private. And then they won't compete. And that's really unique. The USTA did a study. It's actually quite old now because I remember when I was working with a lot of high-performance kids, they brought a bunch of us in and kind of told us what they learned from studying all these other countries. And the number one thing they learned is that American kids were playing far fewer sets than all their counterparts in Spain and Italy and France and Germany and Russia. It was in some cases 5 sets to 1. So if you, at that time, and I don't think it's changed much, if you grab your average 16-year-old boy in America doing tennis, USA tennis, and count how many sets he's playing, and then compare that to someone in Spain, it could be 4 or 5 times more sets. Now, the American kid will have, more lessons, more privates, more equipment, but they just don't compete. And I have that at my club. Everywhere I go, pros tell me the same thing. I can't get these kids to play, But if you offer a group lesson and you offer it to sign up, then boom, it fills up right away, and people come to that because it's convenient and it's fun. Hopefully it's fun. But, they're missing the boat. So I tell our kids and our families that's dangerous. It sounds kind of good at the beginning, but if I were to sign up, here's my analogy. If Lisa walks into this, Lisa, it's you, you're going to go into a college course, and the professor on the first day says to you, hey, listen, in this college course, we don't take quizzes, we don't take exams, we don't do anything. All we do is a final on the last day. Well, most college kids and most people will say, oh, cool, this will be an easy course, and they kind of like that they're not going to get tested along the way. But on the last day, when you're taking your final, and it's going to be 100% of your grade, if you read the first question and you don't know it, you might have a problem. But then you read question 2 and you don't know it, and then if you read question 3, you don't know it, now it's too late. You now realize, oh my gosh, I'm going to fail. I should have taken those quizzes and tests along the way to give me feedback to let me know that I'm not ready. Well, that's what matches are. That's what tournaments are, and that's what matches are. And the phrase I like to use all the time is failure is only feedback. Because our kids get so caught up, like, oh, I lost and I can't win. It's horrible. I suck. I'm no good. But failure is feedback. So you lose, you come back from the tournament. All my kids, and they know this, if they can't answer this question, they're going to be in trouble with me, which is what do you got to work on? You just now played a tournament. Probably you lost because there's 32 kids and 31 of them lost. So what do you need to work on? That's all I want to know. What did you learn from that tournament? What kind of feedback do you have? Maybe you went to that tournament thinking that your serve was good, but now you realize, man, my second serve under pressure is not so good. Bam, that was worth it then. Now we know what to work on. So I think that's a huge thing that people don't get. It happens even at the lower level for just kids who aren't playing too much USTA, but high school tennis is even worse there. And their final exam is basically tryouts. So this happens in clubs all across America. Kids will come in, they'll take, Coach, I'm going to really train this year. I'm going to take 3 drills. I'm going to take a private. I'm going to really practice my face off. And then they get to in Michigan, they'll go out in March and try their tryouts. And then only then they realize, oh, my gosh, my serve is horrible, and I choked my brains out. It's the same thing as not taking those quizzes in that class. You might think it's a good idea until you realize when it's too late that, man, I needed that feedback. So failure is feedback, and if you look at it that way, you can endure a lot more.
Well, it's interesting because I've broached this very topic with several different guests on this show, the importance of match play. And I'm based in Atlanta, and there are tennis academies on pretty much every other corner across the city. There's so many kids in the Atlanta area playing competitive tennis. And, it just boggles me that the academies or the coaches don't get together and arrange cross-academy play, ladders, whatever, just, to get these kids playing more matches. And I've talked about it a bunch, and I'm glad to hear you bring up the topic, too, because I know, and I don't know what your experience was in Michigan, but I grew up in Louisiana. We played practice matches every day. I mean, I can count probably on my hands and feet the number of private lessons I ever had during my developmental years. And, yes, I had drills every day, but the end of drills was match play every day. And the weekends was working your way up the club ladder and playing matches, challenge matches that way. What do you think happened? Why did that go
I have an idea, and this is, this is referring to the article. Is also in the article called Serial Drillers, because, we take on serial killers. But these are kids who just drill. And as I taught, and by the way, everywhere I go, if I ask American coaches, hey, are your kids playing enough matches? They all just roll their eyes and go, are you kidding me? I can't get these kids. So it's not just in certain pockets of the country. It's everywhere. But here's the problem that I think is happening, and this is going to sound weird for me because I have a tennis website for tennis drills, but I think that drills, group lessons, have become the enemy of match play. Now, I'm not saying that you should not have group lessons, but group lessons are one piece of a player's development. We call them drills. Sometimes they're called clinics. Sometimes they're called group lessons, whatever. I'm talking when you get together and, with a bunch of kids. Maybe there's 24 kids on 6 courts, and you're drilling your faces off. That has become, at least with the people I talk to, so convenient, and there's no risk there. So if you're a 17-year-old in Holland, Michigan, where I live, if you show up to my drills class, it's going to be fun. I mean, I'm going to do drills that are great. They're going to get a great workout. We're going to have music playing. I'm going to give good demonstrations and really good job of selling the kids. This is what this drill is supposed to teach you. Let's get after it and stay on them. And they think it's enough. So in a weird way, the better the drills, the less they want to play because they think drills is solving all my problems, which it is not. So that's a struggle. I mean, I try, even to this day, I'm not happy with how many matches our kids are playing. So I'm always trying stuff. We have a policy at the club where parents can play for free. We have an adopt a kid program where a high school kid can adopt a red ball kid and play foam ball tennis with them just so that they're out there once in a while. But it's an uphill battle, and I think kids, part of it is they don't want to put it on the line. They don't want to lose. So if I go to drill, I'm going to just work out, and I'm not going to lose. And I want them to keep score. The score is usually the enemy for a lot of kids. They play fine and say, okay, let's keep score, and bam, they play bad. Something about the scoreboard makes them play a lot worse. So what they do is they avoid the scoreboard, which is the exact opposite, because now when eventually you're going to have to play. A lot of the kids at my club, their main purpose for playing is to play high school tennis. That's the big thing around here. Now, we have a lot of them that play USTA as well, but probably more than half are basically they want to play on the varsity tennis teams and do good. But guess what you do on varsity tennis? You play matches. You don't practice. Right. So they'll come and take all year long. We're in the winter up here. We have bad weather, so we're indoors for the most part from October to March. And they'll come and they're just always, this is my year, man. I'm going to play number one singles, and they tell me all the stuff they're doing, and I'm looking at their regimen. I'm like, okay, where's the match play? Well, I'm going to try to play a couple tournaments. And then you go, well, what tournament? Well, I'm going to look it up. And they don't, so they can get through, a whole year and play 0 tournament matches, and then they go to the tryouts, and then they fail. So one little formula that I like is. And it's helping a lot of our kids. I can think of 3 or 4 kids that started doing this in the last 3 months at my club. That's helped them a lot. And as I explain this to parents, and sometimes parents are like, wow, I can't believe you're telling me to, because we have a walk-on pass to make it easy. So once you're in even one lesson and you're a member, which most of my kids are, then they can use a walk-on pass, which allows them to get to court for free if they book it within 24 hours. So I'm telling parents, don't have your kid do 2 or 3 drills. Have them do 1 drill, and don't pay for the second or third, and use your walk-on, which is free. And they're like, wow, you're telling me to spend less money. I go, exactly. You should be spending less money. You're out of alignment right now. You got way too much practice and not enough match play. So a good measure is at least for every hour you drill, you should be having a play hour. So if you go to 4 hours a drill, that's 2 drills, maybe 2 hours each, you should be playing 4 hours of tennis matches on top of that, or playing out sets. That would be my preferred thing. But I can even handle a 2-to-1 ratio. So, if you do 2 hours, you got to at least, at a minimum, play 1 hour. And if you drill 4 hours, you got to play at least 2 hours. So my tennis academy that I'm running in the summer at Hope College, the thing is quite big. We sell out almost every week. At 72 kids. We have this big, beautiful stadium that we do it at. And of the 25 hours the kids are with us, 10 of those hours are match play. But see, that's built in the summer, so they have no choice. They're going to play. That's just the way I set up the academy. But once school season comes, and really all that's being offered is the after-school lessons, then they can slip through the cracks. You start looking, and the kid that played 10 hours of matches a week in the summer, now he's playing, when's your last match? Well, 6 weeks ago I played Jimmy or something. And so that's something that has to be monitored, and I think parents should definitely hold kids accountable to that. That could be part of the deal. I pay, and I do this. You behave, you try like crazy, you play these numbers. you got to play the matches. You don't have to win the matches. That's a distinction too.
I think what happens a lot too is families are using tournaments as match play. You know, they're signing their kids up for so many tournaments because it's the only way they get match play.
Right. See, yeah, the other thing about match play, and I'm actually working on a course right now that I'll have available on my website later this year, but it's just a how to practice course. One of the things I think that I helped especially those high-performance kids, was if I look back on what I think I did to help them the most, it was I showed them how to practice. Not necessarily when they're with me. When they're with me, it's going to be fine because I'm going to run a good practice. But these top kids that are hitting with their friends, maybe an extra 8 to 10 hours a week, if you look in on that, that's quite often wasted time. It's bad. Two of the girls that I coached that won national championships were actual sisters, and I would watch them at my club hitting on their own because I make sure they go out and do that. And half the time it was a complete waste of time. They were mad at each other. They're hitting this low energy. So I created a bunch of games around different areas of the game. So, to me, I like to explain tennis as the 5 play situations. In tennis, at any one time, you're always doing one of 5 things. You're either serving, so that's play situation 1 is you're serving, or you're returning, or you're playing from the baseline, or you're playing from the net, or you're hitting passing shots and lobs, which means you're backing the guys up. That's it. There's only 5 possible things you're going to be doing as you play. So I like that because it's easily understood. You can package it nicely. And then step 2 is I go to the players and say, okay, you know what you're like out there. You know what's in your heart when you compete in a match. So what are these areas you need to develop better? Don't pick all 5. Let's pick 1 or 2 right now. Tell me what you want to work on. And they say, well, my net game and my return. Those are the 2 for that player. And the next player might pick something completely different. They might pick serve and baseline play. But it keeps kids on task. So once they have those areas picked out, then I have a bunch of games, and that's what this course is going to be like. It really helps the players get good at that stuff. Like I said, pick baseline. There's 5 or 6 classic games that I've played over the years with these kids that I think have really, moved the dial quite a bit for them. And this meaningful practice and purposeful practice, that's like huge. And it's not so, I think we can assume that when they're with a coach, or at least hopefully you can assume that practice time is going to be good. But we all know that a really, really good USA player, a lot of the time they practice have to be on their own, or you're going to go bankrupt. You can't, be with a coach 30 hours a week probably, especially if it's private. So we have to show these kids, when you practice, this is what you do. And the pros have figured this out. The pros can hit with each other, and they're not going to waste time. So I think that's a super important thing, is just taking responsibility for your own game. And, right now I'm in the process of filling out these sheets, these play situation sheets with our academy. I've got about half of them turned in. And then in the afternoons, when it comes to match play, I'm going to start assigning specific games. Today, you two aren't going to play a match. We're going to play this game because this works on your passing shots and your net skills, which is what you both need to work. So I set up the game and let them go at it. But I think it's kind of strange how many kids, don't get that. They just think, well, I'm showing up. I'm coming every week to your academy, and I'm doing 24 hours a week. So showing up doesn't make you good. It's the start, but I have lots of kids as a tennis coach, and those coaches out there that are listening will know this. It's always strange to me how I can have a clinic. These kids come to me in the fall. They sign up for the same 4 hours of clinics. Their buddies may be similar in ability, similar in athleticism. And you check in 9 months later, and player A has gotten 3 times better, and player B has gotten 1 time better. And I go, what's the diff there? Why did Bill get 3 times better than Jim? Why? Is it they all heard the same speeches, they all heard the same demos, they all did the same drills? So a lot of it has to do with, intensity, because you can come to 2 hours and maybe burn 4,000 calories, and your neighbor can come they're 1,000 calories, so you got to make sure you're working hard when you're out there. But you also just can't punch the clock and say, well, I did a summer long, the whole summer we have an option called summer long for our academy, where they can come all 10 weeks the whole summer. We have like 35 kids that choose that, so these are pretty committed kids. But of that 35, not all of them are going to double their skill. Some will double, some will go up a little bit, and some will stay flat. I'm always preaching that. Where are you going to be in that scale? Are you going to be a kid that really goes up, or are you going to just get 2% better this summer?
Right. That's interesting. It's funny that you mentioned about how the pros practice, and one thing that I think is really valuable if you have the opportunity is, if there's a professional event happening in your town, or, professional players play at a local club and you have the opportunity to go watch, it really is a very different